Hey friends, welcome to the Kids Ministry Circle podcast. Kids Ministry Circle is a community for kids ministry leaders to be encouraged and equipped to love and serve the local church. I'm your host, Lauren Jackson, and this week's episode is so fun. You are going to love my conversation with Brittany Nelson. Brittany is a longtime fan of kids ministry. She served on staff for a number of years. Her husband continues to serve on staff. But the coolest part about Brittany, well, there's two cool parts, but the first one is that she is the creator and founder of Deeper Kidmin. Deeper Kidmin is full, and now I mean full of resources for kids ministry leaders, from events to curriculum to coloring pages to really anything you would need to have an incredible kids ministry program, whether on Sunday mornings or throughout the week. But the second cool thing about Brittany is that she launched a book. She actually wrote a book and it launched yesterday. So we are celebrating her new book, Time to Update. You'll hear more about the book in our conversation, and you'll hear more about Brittany's heart for kids ministry leaders to utilize technology and utilize what our kids are already learning and how they are already learning to reach them for the gospel. So you are going to love this conversation, and I cannot wait to dive in. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to share about something coming to a city near you this fall. In 2023, you were asking new questions about what it means to lead your ministry. Like, what do we measure beyond attendance? How do we know if we're leading our ministries well? And are we handing the next generation a lasting, authentic kind of faith? These are the questions we're all asking, because it seems like people aren't coming back to our buildings like they used to. And if they are, it still doesn't guarantee we're handing them a brighter faith and future. So what if we could reframe for ourselves and our entire team what success looks like in 2023? This fall, Orange is bringing you a 1 day of live ministry training to a city near you so that you and your entire team can learn together. You'll learn what's new in culture, what's next developmentally for the kids and teenagers in your church, and you'll show your team what it looks like to keep faith alive. Orange Tour is coming to a city near you so you can bring your staff, volunteers, parents, any leader who cares about the faith and future of the next generation to a 1 day event guaranteed to spark ideas, collaboration, and innovation in your approach to ministry. For every ministry leader and ministry team looking to build a brighter future, a stronger team, a clear strategy for the year ahead. It's a 1 day packed with practical training, and it only comes around once a year. To find a location near you, go to orangetour.org. When you register, use code Kids Ministry Circle OT23 at checkout to get 10% off the ticket price. That's orangetour.org and use code Kids Ministry Circle OT23. We'll see you there. Brittany, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so glad that you were here. We met, I feel like we've always interacted online, but then we met, we scheduled a Zoom coffee meeting. I feel like what I can call it, just to connect, because I know, because we're in this world of kids ministry, and I recommend your website all the time.
Thanks.
And we're both moms of young kids. And so there's a lot that we can relate about. And so it was so fun to get to know you. And now I get to introduce you to all the podcast listeners and celebrate your new book. And so I would love for you to kind of kick off this conversation by telling us a little bit about yourself, telling us about how you got started in the kids ministry world, and then maybe talk a little bit about Deeper Kidmin and what does that look like, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Brittany Nelson. I live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, a suburb of Atlanta. So we're not right inside the city. My husband is a youth pastor at our church and has been for about 15 years. We have two little girls. One is 3. Her name is Holloway. We call her our three-nager because the attitude is very present, drama sometimes. And then we also have a almost 9-month-old Kinsley who is learning to crawl and eat and just how to exist and just grow. So it's really fun to watch, to have those two. And to watch them enjoy themselves with life. But I started in children's ministry as a children's pastor. So I was a children's pastor for about 5 years at a local church. We were a mobile church, so we met at a local high school and didn't even have our own building. And my husband was the youth pastor at that church at the time as well. And we did that for about 5 years. But we quickly realized that it just wasn't going to be sustainable long term for us when we wanted to start our family. And so I started kind of exploring, well, then what does that mean? Like, what else am I supposed to do? Because I love children's ministry and I really felt called to children's ministry. And so I kind of just really decided that if I couldn't be a children's pastor, I wanted to support children's pastors. And that's really how Deeper Kidmin got started. It was a way where I could share some of the experiences that I had had, the things that I had learned, the mistakes that I had made, and some of the resources and curriculum and stuff that I had written. I started sharing it with other people. And so that's really how Deeper Kidmin got started. And then I knew of Download Youth Ministry from my youth pastor husband and Teachers Pay Teachers because I was going to go into the education world and be a high school language arts teacher until God was like, nope, just kidding. But I knew about those two platforms and didn't feel like I had seen anything like that for children's ministry. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not the only one who's ever written anything for their ministry. Like what would it look like to create something like that for the children's ministry world? And so that's really what Deeper Kidmin is now. Yes, it's still a blog where I get to share some ideas and encouragement and stuff, but it's also and mainly an online marketplace where leaders are sharing and selling the resources that they've created for their ministries with other ministry leaders to use too. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or if you're like, hey, I need a creative fall event, but I'm coming up blank, someone else probably has an event on Deeper Kidmin that you can be like, oh, that's perfect. Download, right? And I'll use that for my ministry. And so I get to run Deeper Kidmin now and do things like this, talk about children's ministry on podcasts and at conferences and create resources. I'm still creating resources. And the biggest resource that I just created, I guess, is the book that
Yes.
I'm super excited. This is like the first out in the wild copy, I think. So I just got it yesterday, but I'm super, super excited about this book. It's called Time to Update: 7 Areas to Integrate Digital Discipleship into Your Children's Ministry Strategy, which is a mouthful. And I understand. But the short title that I've been calling it is Time to Update. And my 3-year-old knows the title of it too, because she's like, oh, Mommy, your book is called Time to Update. I'm like, that's right, baby girl. It is.
That's so cute.
I'm going to make an Instagram reel with her. Promoting
she's going to be your best. She's going to be your best marketing agent.
100%. But this book is all about what it says in the subtitle, digital discipleship, and what that looks like in children's ministry. Because I think there's a big kind of misconception about digital discipleship and what digital ministry strategy really is and what it looks like. And so that misconception creates a lot of fear and avoidance at the same time. But I think it's something that we have to embrace as ministry leaders if we want to reach this next generation and even their parents who are all digital natives. So that's a little bit about me and kind of what I do and what I've been working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. I am so excited about your book. And I have read bits and pieces of it as I was kind of preparing for this interview. And as I was reading through the chapters and I was really encouraged, but also I consider myself a digital native. And I have had experiences where entering into the digital space does bring fear and brings this level of uncertainty. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to cast vision for a digital strategy when half your team is not digital and half your team is way digital. And so I would love to know kind of how you came up with this idea. What maybe experiences made you realize of having a digital ministry strategy would be really helpful. Yeah. What kind of caused you to maybe sit down and be like, this needs to be a book? Yeah. And why now?
Yeah. So great question. So obviously COVID, right, changed a lot of things.
Yes, obviously.
People, especially in the ministry world. And I remember it was actually, I have a text, I took a screenshot of it the other day, a text that I sent to one of my friends and mentors in March of 2021. And I said, hey, I started writing a book today. It makes me want to dance and puke at the same time. but I think it's going to be really important. And she was like, great. And then had a question about my first goal or something like that. I'm like, this is why I told you why I love you. But I just remember going into COVID and being like, okay, so we're going to have to be online for a couple months and then we'll be back to normal. It'll be fine. Right. And then a year later, it's like, well, we're still here, you know, like we're still looking very, very differently. But starting to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and realizing, okay, yes, things will go back to not quite normal, right? But things will go back to full in-person ministry, but realizing that it can't go back to what it was before. That like COVID kind of pushed us all into the deep end of the digital world, for better or worse. But I think leaders who try to go back to pre-COVID practices 100% are greatly lacking reach and engagement levels with their families. And so March 2021 is when I was like, I'm going to write a book. But I think it was another year of research and conversations and like, what are people doing? What does digital ministry look like after COVID? Like now that we are starting to come back, what does it look like now? Right. Because we're not all still having Zoom Sunday mornings with kids, right? Or like live streaming our services. Right. Amen. So we're moving beyond that. Right. But there's still elements of the digital world that can influence and should influence the way that we do ministry. And so I started, like I said, researching, talking to people. There was one leader that I talked to that I was like, so what do you think digital ministry strategy is? You know, and I'm like, I'm still trying to define it too, you know? And he was like, I have no idea, but when someone figures it out, it's going to be amazing, you know? Yep. And I'm like, yes, I agree. And I don't claim to have it figured out at all, but I've been talking with leaders for 2 years now about this topic and seeing what people are doing. And I read a lot of books. That's how I learn, is I read. And so I've read a lot of books about the digital world and digital ministry kind of in general, but I wasn't really finding anything that related specifically to children's ministry, which is where my heart is, and which is where I think there's a lot of very specific practices and approaches to digital discipleship when it comes to kids, especially because kids are digital natives, and even their parents now, like the parents in your ministry are now digital natives too. And so, so it has to influence. So that's really kind of why of the book, I guess. And also kind of looking at my daughters and being like, okay, like they learn very differently than I do. They, are growing up in a world, like I'm a digital native too, but my digital native status is still even slightly different than theirs, you know, because I grew up, or I was born in the 90s, and so technically a digital native, but some people claim that true digital natives aren't until after like the first iPhone came out in like 2007.
Right.
And so, so like my girls today, my 3-year-old just an hour ago was playing with an old cell phone. It's like, oh, mommy, I got a text message. And I was like, oh, did you? Yes. Cool. Like, who texted you? You know, or like she's planning her birthday party, which is not until February, by the way. But she's planning it. And she's like, mommy, you should just text the Disney princesses and tell them I want them to come. And I said, well, I don't have their phone number, you know? So like just the world that these kids are growing up in, right, is very, very different than in the worlds of the past. And so it's got to influence the way that we do ministry to them and to their families. And so that's really kind of why I wrote the book was, hey, I see people are trying to figure this out, and I haven't seen any other resources that are working towards solutions.
Yeah, that's so true. And yes, I think all of those things are so great. And I do think COVID kind of pushed the ministry world into the digital deep end. And I love the pool analogy because I do think there's ministry leaders who like jump back into the shallow end, or you think about like the steps leading into the pool and they're like, I can't, I'm not ready. We're not ready. Our team is not ready. Our staff is not ready. Like we just can't be fully digital. Yeah. And there's going to be a point where they have no choice. And so I think your book is an incredible resource. I would love for you to explain what you mean by a digital ministry strategy, because we see the phrase ministry strategy come up a lot when it comes to curriculum and how you're teaching and what you're teaching and discipleship and partnering with parents and all of those things. And so what do you mean by digital ministry strategy?
Yeah. So a digital ministry strategy is just your regular ministry strategy that's been influenced by the digital world and technology.
Yeah.
And so another word that I use a lot, another term that I use a lot is digital discipleship. And again, a lot of people think that is, oh, that means I have to host a Zoom meeting with my kids, or that means I have to have a YouTube channel or like live stream my children's ministry service or whatever. And those elements might be part of your digital ministry or digital discipleship strategy, but they aren't digital discipleship in and of themselves. Because I think one thing that people have to understand is that the end goal of discipleship doesn't change, right? So we still want kids to grow deeper in their relationship with Jesus. We still want families connected to each other and to the Lord, right? Like that end goal of discipleship doesn't move, doesn't change. That's not new, right? But the methods and the approach that we take adopts that digital influence so that we can better engage kids who are already living in a digital world anyway. So when we say digital ministry strategy and digital discipleship, it's kind of like adding a little spice, adding a little digital flavor to your ministry strategy that you already have in place. And I think that's something that once a lot of leaders come to understand and realize that you're not starting from scratch when you adopt a digital ministry strategy or when you integrate digital discipleship into the strategy you have, you're not starting over. You're not having to like throw out everything that you're doing and completely reinvent the wheel, right? You're looking at what you're doing and what's already effective and saying, how can the digital world help improve this? Or how might the digital world affect the way we do that? Like even something as simple as signups, right? Like if you're still asking people to sign up on paper and turn in a paper form, like that's a really simple place to start we'll just make a Google form, or like use planning center registrations or like finding some sort of way to allow people to sign up online rather than with paper, like paper and pen registrations.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. What are some other practical ways that you can implement a digital ministry strategy? Because one of the parts that you talk about in your book is the safety piece of it, right? In kids ministry, volunteers aren't texting their kids.
Yeah.
And so they're not like, that's not something that they're going to do to first graders.
Right.
Where that may be different for youth ministry, right? Because they may be texting a student or youth ministry leader or a group of students or a small group like that. So what are some examples of your digital ministry strategy?
Yeah. So the safety and security one is a super easy place to start. Most ministries have a like policies and procedures handbook, or like some sort of listing of policies and procedures. And so a really easy place to start would be to go look at those and see how do they address the digital world, right? So like, can volunteers have cell phones out while they're volunteering? Can they take pictures on their personal phone? Can they post those pictures on their personal social media accounts? Or is it only left to like the ministry, when the ministry posts pictures of kids, are their name tags showing or have you blocked them out for security reasons? Like there's just little simple things like that. Are you aware of the kids in your ministry who maybe are in unique family situations or foster care situations who can't be in pictures online, like legally, for their own safety. And so having some of those policies and procedures in place that help act as like the guardrails or some of the boundaries for practices for your volunteers and your team, just like everything else, right? Like, just like always stay in a group of 3 or, wear your name tag. Like it's just another layer of protection for kids having that policy in place.
Yeah. I feel like that policy comes up a lot during camp season and VBS season, because I feel like all over the kids ministry Facebook pages, everyone's like, do you guys have a photo release form? Do you have a photo policy? And like, now I can just be like, hello, have you read this book by Brittany Nelson? It's so great. It's all the things that you need to know about those policies. But I do think that's an important thing. And I feel like that's an important conversation to have, not only with your volunteers, but with your other staff members. Because at my home church, our like communication team is in charge of photos. And so they'll come around and they do know the policies and they do know where they can take pictures. And we only, for the majority, our large group photos are with kids' backs. And so you don't see faces. It's always funny. Our photographer, will like take pictures of kids' faces when they're like staff kids
Yeah.
because like she's been given
They know.
approval to post those pictures of those kids.
Yeah.
And so it is something that you kind of have to link arms with other
Mm-hmm.
ministry leaders and say, hey, this digital strategy
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just impact my ministry, but it impacts everybody's ministry. When you think about saying yes to Planning Center and putting forms online and doing, like, I think about volunteer applications going online, all of that impacts not just your ministry, but all ministries. Because it really is like hey, we are doing this together and we're all going to dive into this digital ministry strategy together. And so I think that's really helpful to think through those things. I would love for you to share, and I'm sure maybe those listening can relate, where you have either a team or a staff that there are some people who think, no way, technology, I can't do it. I always talk to ministry leaders and they're like, we just have this group of volunteers who just will not get on Planning Center and will not accept or decline, or will not do X, Y, and Z to help us stay digitally organized. And what is your encouragement for those leaders who are trying to like move the boat into this digital world, but they just have some team members who are either refuse or are just stuck?
Yeah. That's first, I'd say that sucks. That's tough. It's hard. Like, it does make it hard when especially when you're so excited about something and you're ready to move forward and you have this vision and you can see it, like how great it's going to be for everyone involved. So it's hard when you meet that opposition. I'd also say it's not personal, right? Like, what's happening to you is most likely happening in at least 4 other churches that are around you, and so it's not you, it's not a reflection of your leadership. But then as far as how to move things forward, baby steps, right? Like, start small. Like, if they are really resistant to Planning Center, maybe you take them out to coffee one day and you just have a conversation and be like, hey, like, what's the deal? You don't like Planning Center? Like, they'll tell you most likely because they probably know exactly why, whether it's, I can't ever remember my password, or I just don't check that email, or, like, it's just another app I don't want to have to learn how to use, but once you understand kind of where their roadblocks are, you can address it more easily and in a more productive way, other than like, just get on board, people,
Right.
That's how you feel. But for them, there might be something either really simple or like truly blocking their kind of ability or capacity to be able to use it. And because for me, like when I did that, so I coordinated our volunteers for children's ministry. And then once I stepped down from being a children's pastor, I worked at our church in an administrative role for 2 or 3 years. And so I was the volunteer coordinator for the entire church. And we live in an area where we have, I think, 3 retirement communities, like within a mile of our church. So we have a large traditional population who's like 55 and up. And like, they're fantastic. I love them, but they hate Planning Center. And so when I was trying to educate our team and like get people assimilated into Planning Center, I would ask them. And one guy was like, yeah, I just don't have an email. And that like blew my mind, because I was like, what do you mean you don't have an email? Right.
What?
Okay, that's fine. Like, we'll figure this out. Are you open to getting an email? And like, so just little simple conversations like that. I'm like, well, of course he never responded to anything on Planning Center because his email does not exist, like, and so,
gosh.
So just situations like that. Or there was someone else who said, this sweet old lady, it was like sweet old lady, love her. But she's like, yeah, I have an email, but I don't really check it, but I love to text. And I was like, okay, like I can get on board with that, Planning Center,
like, we can work with this.
And like, we can do this, and so have those conversations with the people and really find out why. You're probably going to run into somebody who like says they'll do something and they still just won't do it. Right. But that's just human nature. That's part of working with people. My senior pastor at our first church used to say, ministry would be easy if it weren't for the people. So like, I think you're always going to have some sort of resistance from someone, but start with those baby steps. Start with having conversations one-on-one with that person or with those people and being like, hey, like, what's really the problem, you know? Can I show you how to do it? And there were a few of them actually that we would just record, like, here's how to block out something on planning, like recorded our screen and just made a 2-minute video and sent that out to the team. And it made a huge difference. People were like, oh, that's really easy. And I was like, yeah it is. Like, it is really easy. Imagine that, but it was really helpful for them. Whereas, someone else can read the step-by-step instructions. Someone else needs that visual, right? So just finding ways to make it as easy as possible for them to get on board and kind of removing some of those roadblocks.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so great. I'm interested. I feel like there's this trend right now. I don't know if it's just like my or our age group or like being out here in Colorado, but there tends to be this minimalist trend where people are like turning off their phones and trying to disconnect. And those are incredible rhythms to have. And you should have those rhythms.
Yes.
And I feel like more people are seeing the studies that are coming out about how like technology and social media are like not the greatest. And we're like, oh, it's not. I feel like you're like, duh. Like, thank you, studies, for showing us that this is not good, even though we've known this.
Right. We could have told you that.
And so I feel like there's this trend of like trying to not be on our technology and our phones as much.
Yeah.
How can you still have a digital ministry strategy, but still holding fast to the boundaries that you and your family have set in place around phones, computers, iPads, and like all technology?
Yes. Like that. I love this question because sometimes people assume, oh, you wrote a book about digital discipleship. That means your kids have screen time all the time, or like you're always on your phone, and like, that's not true, right? Actually, my kids have very little screen time, if we want to use that phrase. But I even talk about it in the book. It's so important to set up those boundaries. And there are a few things that you can even do in ministry to set up those boundaries so that you're not on your phone all the time, right? Like one of the things I talk about in the social media chapter is about the importance of being present online. And so, yes, it's important to kind of schedule your posts ahead of time to free you up to do other things. But then it's also important to interact, right? And be online, like comment and respond to people and things like that. But that little chapter comes with kind of a caveat of that doesn't mean that you have to be online 24/7, and there are features within Instagram and Facebook that allow you to set up like an automatic reply. If someone messages your Facebook page, they'll get an automatic response that you can set up ahead of time, almost like a digital voicemail, right? And so you can set down times on your phone. Like that's a practice that I do is from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day. My phone goes into like sleep mode, so that I can focus on time with my girls and our evening as a family and things like that. And so digital discipleship strategy doesn't mean that you let the digital world consume you. One of the things I talk about actually in the very, very beginning of the book is in order to employ a digital strategy well, you have to have two things. The first one is acute discernment. And the second is exponential adaptability. And so I think that the question that you ask goes along with that first part of acute discernment, right? Like there's so many things in the digital world and so many apps and tools and all this kind of, like fun stuff to explore. But we have to be really, really discerning in what we choose to give our time to and what we choose to give kind of power to in our ministries. And so, so digital discipleship doesn't mean you like pop in a video on Sunday morning and like, all right, kids, like happy Sunday, and call it a day, right? Like it's so much more than just showing a video, which videos I think are important, but I think you have to go beyond just, like I said, popping in a Bible story video and calling it a Sunday. But so digital discipleship doesn't mean that technology consumes you, right? It just means that you're aware of the digital world and that you allow it to influence. Even actually, so I was talking with somebody on a different podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she asked me about my favorite chapter in the book, which is the one all about teaching digital natives. And she asked me to kind of explain like what I love about it and a little bit about the chapter. And I did. And she was like, Brittany, all the things you just talked about, not once did you mention showing a video or using technology like in teaching. And so a lot of that chapter even talks about like the way that digital natives learn and how it's different. And so how we have to adapt our teaching strategies beyond just using videos and graphics, right? And so what it really truly looks like. And so digital discipleship doesn't just mean there's all these screens involved, right? It just means that the digital world plays a part in the way that we disciple kids for Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that chapter because I teach large group at our church on Sunday mornings. And so I think about how I'm teaching kids all the time. And I think it's so important to remember that the digital world has influenced these kids already.
Yes.
They've already been influenced. And that doesn't mean they need digital things to experience the love and grace and power of Jesus, but it does impact how they learn things in general.
100%. Yes.
And so I think it's important to remember as kids ministry leaders, or really parents, or really anybody that teaches kids, of like, just because they grew up in the digital world doesn't mean they like digital things are required. It just means that they have different ways of learning because the way that the culture and the way that they've been influenced and all of those things, just like when we were kids, there were different things that influenced the way that we learned. And so I think you said this at the very beginning, but sometimes when people hear the word digital, they automatically think bad.
Yeah.
And you just have to separate those two because those do not equal each other.
Right.
And I think it's such a good reminder of like, you can slowly like dip your toes into this digital world and you don't have to have flat screen TVs in every classroom.
Yes.
Because some people hear digital and they think,
I don't have
like
the budget for that.
TVs and soundboards and all this fancy equipment, which like, I get it. I'm married to a worship and production guy. Like I'm sitting in his office that has all the amazing equipment to record videos and all the things. And that's so helpful, but it's not like all of those fancy things in the digital world are not necessary to reach people with the gospel.
Yes. Yes. One thing.
It's a tool that we can use, but it's not necessary.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was just about to say. I'm going to say, think of technology like a tool, right? Just like a hammer that you'd use to build something, right? Like the digital world is just another tool in our ministry toolbox. And so just like a hammer, right? It can be used for good or bad. Like if you use a hammer on someone's car windshield, like bad, right? But if you use a hammer to build something, good, right? And so digital, same thing. Like you can use the world of technology for bad, but it can also be used to create and to build some really awesome experiences for kids and families. Yeah. And so, I think framing our mind of technology as a tool and kind of shifting into that mindset, as opposed to like technology as this like big, scary, expensive thing that's trying to take over the world. Like, I think it helps us gain a better perspective of how we can use it in a good way in our ministries.
Yeah, that's great. What are some of your favorite digital tools? Like if you were, you think about like, if someone is stuck with their paper planner, and like, I get it, paper planners are a thing and some people love them. I've like slowly transitioned like my calendar life digitally, but, and then you think about like Planning Center and all of these tools. If you were to pick maybe like 3 or 4 that you were your favorite for kids ministry leaders. What would you pick?
First one would have to be Planning Center or some sort of volunteer coordination tool. So I know people use Planning Center. I think I've heard people use, what's the other one? Presently, I don't know. It's another one that starts with a P. But what, like some form of volunteer coordination app tool. Like, I don't know how people did volunteer coordination without these tools. Cause just having done it church wide and for my ministry, like I don't understand how it happened before this. So definitely Planning Center, or like some way to streamline your volunteer coordination and scheduling, even Sign Up Genius, right? Like obviously that's a very like low level of scheduling, but like even Sign Up Genius is like a very basic level. So that would be one. A second one would probably be Canva. Like, when I was first starting out in ministry, Canva did not exist. And now I use it daily, like daily. So Canva is definitely a tool now that I think every children's pastor should use. Like you can apply for the pro account as a nonprofit and get it for free. Like do that. Because Canva, if you don't know what Canva is, it's a graphics program, I guess, or graphics website to help you create graphics and images. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
So Canva is definitely one. And then probably like a Google Drive, or like a shared staff online space, whether it's a Google Calendar, Google Drive, like Dropbox, Outlook, like something that the whole staff has access to and can see kind of the dates on the calendar, but also the different like documents and curriculum that you need to share. Or if like you're going on vacation for a week, which you should, like take your vacation, take a Sunday off. Someone else has access to all the things they would need to know to make Sunday morning happen. So some sort of like digital online space that allows you to share and save the resources and documents and all the digital files that come with your ministry. So those are probably my top 3 favorite ones.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I did just see, definitely Canva. I do think if you're not sure how to use Canva, there's so many like courses out there that you can take on how to like train yourself how to use Canva.
Yep.
A Google Suite was definitely on the top of my list, was like something that you can collaborate. Yeah. I watched a ministry leader show me how she does like to-do lists in her Google Calendar. And I was like, this is fascinating.
I want to know how to do that.
I know.
Send me the video.
And then what else? I really like Calendly. And I use Calendly a lot in kids ministry circle world, but I used it quite a bit in like kids ministry, like local church world to like invite parents to like schedule lunch or coffee or volunteers. And like, it just was, I hate the back and forth of like, oh, are you available this time? No. Are you available this time? Nope. Are you like, I just hate that back and forth. I'd much rather be like, here's my Calendly link, find a time that works for both of us. And it automatically goes on your calendar. It automatically goes on their calendar. It's just so easy. And so I would recommend doing that. And I think it's free. Yeah. Like you can have a scheduled like thing, like a coffee lunch or whatever you want to do for free. So I would do that one. I really like Slack. Yes. Slack is like my favorite. I like too. That I used in 2 different staff positions. Our whole staff was on Slack, and it was the easiest way. Like in one context, we used Slack to keep track of new guests. And so we had like a Slack channel that was like new people. And every time we met a new person in the hallway, we would write there like immediately. It was like, Lauren, she's wearing a denim shirt and I would always say like, and really cute shoes. And like my other staff members would be like, what? That doesn't matter. And I'd be like, but it helps me remember who I was talking to. And so that was really helpful. And I feel like I talked a lot about Slack because it really helps ministry leaders separate work and home. Like my Slack could be off. And I had a coworker who was like, Slack me for work things, text me for fun things. Because she was like, I don't want to not hear from you over the weekend if like something funny happens or you like want to like, as friends. And so it was like, keep work things on Slack, keep like personal things in text messages. And good. I had all my volunteers were on Slack. We all communicated. And so it was just really helpful. So that's what I would use.
Yeah, we used Slack as a mobile church, which was great, right? Because we don't have offices. We can't like run down the hall and ask somebody a question. So we used Slack at our first church, and I still love it. Yeah.
Oh, technology. Those things are so helpful. Technology. You kind of mentioned this. I know you kind of mentioned this at the beginning. But if someone is listening to this and they're like, I don't even know where to start. Like our church doesn't do anything digital. Everything is paper. We have filing cabinets of curriculum from like decades ago. Like I literally talked to somebody earlier today who was like, I have all of our curriculum in file cabinets in my office. And I'm like, and recycle so what, I know. I'm like, just, you don't need them anymore. No. What would be your words of encouragement for those who have nothing is digital, but they want to get started?
Right.
What would be some like first steps?
Yeah. So I would say, and actually, well, buy the book, but
yes, buy the book.
Buy the book, step one. But in the book, it really kind of breaks down step by step how to do this, right? And so the first thing I would say is start with assessing where you are. So like take an assessment of, like where are you on that digital scale of like everything's in file cabinets and people are still turning in paper forms to like, oh no, we've got our own YouTube channel, right? Like figure out where you are on that and then figure out where you want to go. Like, what do you want to improve? What are the things on your dreams list or your goals list? And if you're like, I don't even know what to put on those goals lists because like, I don't even know enough to know what I don't know, If that's you, then start talking to other ministry leaders, see what they're doing. Look in an area, talk to your families even and say, hey, like what's a pain point for you in our ministry? And if parents are like, yeah, you always want me to pay in cash. I don't carry cash. Can I pay online? Like that's a very easy way to start. Like that's a very easy place.
I just don't even think about
and
that.
Be like, okay. Yeah. So that's a super easy place to start of, all right, how do we set it up so that we can accept payments online, right? And so you start kind of like in little areas because it is overwhelming. Like it is like there's so much out there that you can do, that you can explore. And again, that back to that like acute discernment thing, right? Like it's not all going to be good for you and for your ministry context. And so as you're dreaming and brainstorming, like figure out what are the baby steps that you can take to kind of move yourself forward, and then just be patient, right? Like don't try to tackle social media and your teaching experience and your environment and the website and partnering with parents in a digital way all at the same time, right? Like choose one thing, improve that one thing, and then move on to the next thing. I'd also say leaders have to be aware of kind of the time length of some of our goals. Like I think sometimes we write goals and some of them are like, oh yeah, I could get that done in the next week. And then some of them are like, no, that's going to take a year or two, or more, because it might require a culture change in your ministry or kind of just a bigger picture. There's more steps that, have to be involved. So being aware of some of those like little things that like, yeah, I could set up a Slack channel for our staff this week, but if I want to get all of my volunteer team on Slack, that's going to take a few months because I've got to teach them what Slack is and how to use it, and so just being aware of some of those like long-term versus short-term goals as you are working toward it. But start small. You don't have to do it all at once. Take baby steps.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, the last question we always ask is, if you were talking to someone brand new in kids ministry, what would be your words of encouragement or advice?
Okay, that's a good question. I think I would say if you're brand new to children's ministry, first I'd say, welcome to the adventure. We're glad you're here. It's a wild ride, but it's amazing. And then I would probably say prioritize two things. Prioritize a posture of learning and prioritize rest. I think that first one, prioritizing that posture of learning, like if you walk into, especially if you're walking into a brand new position at a new church or just like you're new to the position, learn as much as you can in that first 6 months before you're like, we're just going to change everything,
right.
We're doing it all differently. Like just go in with that mindset of, okay, what can I learn? What can I learn from the volunteers that are here? What can I learn from my staff? What can I learn from the kids in my ministry? Honestly, they could probably teach you more about the digital world than anyone else. So if you want to know how to use Canva or how to make a video or how to, whatever, ask one of your fifth graders because they'll be able to tell you. I'm like, oh yeah, I can pull it up on my phone and show you right now. So have that posture of learning and always be in a space where you're trying to learn more so that you can learn, for lack of a better word, but so that you can continue to grow as a leader, so that you can continue to be someone who is always experimenting and being open to creativity. And then that second thing is prioritizing rest, because if you don't, then you won't last very long in this in ministry. And it's super, super important. And that is coming from like, I love to learn, but I hate to rest. And so that is coming from someone who is like a total nerd, but who also is terrible at setting those boundaries and taking time. But I have also learned how important it is to take that time to rest and take that time to step away and to turn off your phone and to get off email and whatever it is. So I would say if you're brand new, those two things, prioritize learning and prioritize rest.
Yes, I agree. Yes to that. That's so good and so encouraging and such great advice. Brittany, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being on the podcast. This was so fun. I think your book is an incredible resource and going to serve so many churches well. If people want to know more about you, about Deeper Kidmin, about your book, we're going to link everything in the show notes, but do a quick flyover of like, where's the best place to find you?
So the book is available on Amazon. So you just Time to Update Brittany Nelson. You'll find it on Amazon. Deeperkidmin.com/Time to Update book is another kind of page on our website that has more information. When you buy the book, you also get access to a bunch of free downloads that help you implement some of the ideas within the book. And so that landing page kind of tells you a little bit about what you get in those free downloads. And then deeperkidmin.com. We have the blog, the marketplace, all the resources there. And then we're on Facebook and Instagram as @DeeperKidmin. So that's kind of where we can connect.
Yay. That's so great. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we'll have to have you come back one day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
I loved my conversation with Brittany today. She was so full of wisdom, but also just so encouraging. It felt like I was talking to a longtime ministry friend and just grabbing coffee and sharing the most recent ministry stories. I hope that you heard what she had to say about using technology in a good way and not just thinking about it in a negative way. And I truly hope that you can go and buy her book, Time to Update, today. Add it to your to-be-read list. Send it out to your volunteers, encourage your whole leadership team to read it, and really think about ways that you guys can continue to update your ministries so that they can reach the next generation of parents and kids. For all of the information on Deeper Kidmin, on Brittany, on where to find her book, it's all going to be in the show notes. So you can head to the show notes for this episode and find all that you need to keep learning. As always, you can follow along to Kids Ministry Circle, both on Instagram and Facebook @Kids Ministry Circle. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.